All right. So, we've been digging into some pretty interesting stuff lately.
Yeah.
And, you flag that legal firm in Almeria,
Yeah.
MCHM Abogados, talking about the whole concurso de acreedores.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, legal jargon, it's like a whole different language sometimes.
Yeah.
It get pretty confusing.
It really can.
So let's try to break it down today, like really get a handle on that first big step, the face come on.
Exactly. It's like the foundation,
Oh, yeah.
When a business or a person hits a wall and they just can't pay their debts, that's where concurso de acreedores comes in. It's the legal process that kicks in.
Right, like a safety net almost? Or
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
So we're zeroing in on those first crucial moves in this whole process.
Absolutely.
It's about getting that super clear picture of what the person or company actually has, their assets, and then on the flip side, who they owe money to.
Right.
Yeah.
Those two sides of the coin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like we said, this initial phase, this phase come on, is like the bedrock.
Yeah, it sets the stage for everything that comes after.
So getting it right is absolutely key.
Absolutely.
We're going to really hone in on the two core elements. They highlighted the inventory of their possessions and then the list of creditors, everyone they owe.
Yeah, makes sense.
So how does this whole face mnemonic actually get rolling? What triggers it?
Well, it all starts officially with the admission of the concurso by a mercantile judge.
Right.
That's like the official starting pistol.
Okay.
And what's interesting is MCHM Abogados pointed out that this request to enter concurso de acreedores can come from two directions. It can come from the debtor themselves when they realize, I'm in trouble, I can't meet my obligations.
Makes sense.
Or, and this is interesting, it can also come from the creditors, the people who are owed money.
So it's not just the responsibility of the one in trouble to initiate this process.
Exactly. It can come from either side.
Interesting. So once that request is made, it lands on the judge's desk.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So the judge then has to make a ruling, and they formally declare the concurso. But here's a really important part. They appoint what's called the administrador concursal.
Oh.
And this is a key player we're going to be talking a lot about.
Okay, so the judge says, yes, this is happening, and they bring in this administrador concursal. What's the point of this phase come in? Why is it so important?
MCHM Abogados lays out two main goals.
Okay.
First, it's all about getting a really thorough understanding of the debtor's financial situation.
Okay.
This means going through all their assets and rights, everything they own and everything they're entitled to, and figuring out their value and condition.
Makes sense.
And second, this is equally important, it's about establishing control over those assets.
Right. So things don't just disappear.
Exactly. It's about making sure there's a fair and organized way for creditors to eventually get back at least some of what they're owed.
Control is definitely a key word there.
Yeah.
I can see why that's crucial.
Yeah.
Now let's talk more about this administrador concursal. You said they're super important. So what do they actually do in this initial phase?
They have a big job. According to the information we have, the administrador concursal has to put together a detailed report within 2 months of being appointed.
Wow, 2 months. That's a tight deadline.
It is, especially when you consider everything that needs to go into this report.
So what are they scrambling to put together in that short amount of time?
Okay, so the report has a few main sections. First, there's the Memoria Histórica y Jurídica.
Okay.
This is basically an analysis of all the legal and historical documents the debtor provides. It's like laying out the backstory in official paperwork.
Okay, so it's like the debtor's financial history.
Exactly. Then there's the Inspección de la Contabilidad, which is a deep dive into the accounting books and records. This is where they really scrutinize the flow of money and figure out the real financial health or lack thereof of the debtor.
So they're checking if the numbers add up.
Exactly.
Right.
And finally, they compile a diagnostico patrimonial, which is an evaluation of the debtor's current financial standing, like a snapshot of where things are at that moment.
So they're looking at the past, the present, and all the financial paperwork.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about the inventory of assets earlier.
Yeah.
The note called this the Inventario de la Masa Activa. What exactly does that include?
The Inventario de la Masa Activa is basically a list of everything the debtor owns that has economic value, all their assets and rights.
Okay.
But MCHM Abogados make it clear that it's not just physical things like buildings or equipment.
Right.
It also includes intangible assets, things like patents, trademarks, or for a tech company, the code for their software, things you can't touch but are still worth a lot of money.
So it's not just about what you can see and touch. It's also about those less obvious, but often very valuable assets.
Exactly. And here's another thing. What happens if there are legal disputes over some of these assets?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, the note specifically mentions that any ongoing legal battles related to these assets also have to be included in the inventory because it can directly affect the value and whether those assets can actually be used to pay off creditors.
Right. You can't really sell something to repay debts if someone else is saying, hey, that's mine in court.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a handle on how they figure out what the debtor has. Now let's switch gears and talk about the lista de acreedores, the list of everyone they owe money to. How do they put that together?
The purpose of the list of the acreedores is pretty simple. It's to create a record of everyone the debtor owes money to.
Okay.
Now, the information you found breaks these debts down into two main categories. First, there are the créditos contra la masa.
Yep.
You can think of these as like emergency debts. They happen after the concurso has been declared.
So like debts incurred during the process itself.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is these get top priority for payment.
Oh, wow. So they get paid first.
Yeah, which shows how important they are. They're essential to keep things running during the process.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want new debts to get lost in the shuffle of the old ones.
Right. And then the second category is créditos concursales. These are the debts that existed before the concurso was declared. And within this category, there are subcategories privileged, ordinary, and subordinated.
So it gets even more specific.
It does. And although MCHM Lawyers didn't go into the details of each subcategory, it's important to know that they exist because this categorization directly affects the priority of repayment. Some creditors are legally entitled to get paid before others.
So there's a hierarchy even within the existing debts. It sounds like a very structured system to make sure everyone is accounted for and their claims are addressed in a specific order.
Exactly. It's about creating a clear and fair process.
Now, what happens if a creditor looks at this list and says, hold on a second, that's not right. They owe me more, or my debt should be in a higher category. Is there a way for them to challenge this?
Yes, absolutely. The system has checks and balances built in.
Okay.
The note explains that creditors have the right to challenge or impugnar the administrator's report if they think their debts haven't been acknowledged or classified correctly.
So they can say, hey, wait a minute, I don't agree with this.
Exactly, and they need to provide evidence to back up their claim.
Okay.
Then the judge who's overseeing the whole concurso process reviews these challenges and makes a decision.
So it's not just up to the administrator. There's a process for creditors to have their say.
Exactly. It's designed to be fair and transparent.
We talked about how this phase common starts. How does it actually end? What's the signal that this initial stage is over?
The phase common officially ends when the judge approves the administrator's report, which includes both the inventory of assets and the list of creditors.
Okay.
Once the judge gives the green light, the process moves on to the next phases. And according to the information we have, there are two main possibilities. The first is the agreement phase, or phase de convenio, where they try to work out a deal with the creditors on how to repay the debts.
Okay.
And if that doesn't work out, if they can't reach an agreement, then they move on to the liquidation phase, or phase de liquidación, where they sell off the debtor's assets to try to pay off the debts.
So the path forward depends on whether they can strike a deal with the creditors.
Exactly. The debtor's financial situation and their ability to reach an agreement with the people they owe money to are the deciding factors.
Okay, so the judge's approval of that initial report is the big turning point. It's like gathering all the pieces of the puzzle before you start trying to put it together. So to wrap up our deep dive into this first phase, what are the key takeaways from what MCHM Lawyers told us about the phase commune?
I think the most important takeaway is just how crucial this phase commune really is. It's about establishing a clear and accurate picture of the debtor's finances right from the start.
Yeah, like setting the foundation.
Exactly. The inventory of assets and the list of creditors aren't just boxes to tick. They're essential tools that provide a transparent view of what the debtor owns and who they owe. It's the basis for all the steps that come after.
It's like a financial audit of the debtor's entire situation.
Yeah, a very thorough one. And the administrator concursal plays a huge role in making sure this information is correct and complete.
So they're like the investigator.
In a way, yes. It makes you think about the challenges involved in all of this, trying to recover debts or being on the other side facing financial distress. It's not just about legal procedures. There are real people and businesses dealing with a lot of stress and uncertainty.
Yeah, it's a human story, too.
Absolutely. You have creditors who are worried about losing money and having to navigate a complex legal system, and then you have debtors who are struggling financially and might have to restructure or even liquidate their business or their personal assets. It's a tough situation all around.
It really highlights the human side of debt and financial problems.
Yeah.
And I guess understanding the legal frameworks like this concurso de acreedores process can help provide some structure and guidance in those difficult situations.
Absolutely. Having a clear process can make things a little less overwhelming, even though it's still a complex and challenging situation.
So much to think about. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the phase común of concurso de acreedores. Thanks to the information from MCHM Abogados in Almeria. Thanks for joining me.
Of course.
Until next time, keep those questions coming.
Absolutely.
Bye for now.